It's great to have you here one more time for an incredible episode of GSD Presents Silicon Valley AI and Tech. And my name is Gary Fowler. I am the CEO and co-founder of GSD, and it's a great privilege for me to introduce my friend Luca Cartechini. Luca, it's great to have you on the show today. And I want to talk about, Luca, I want to talk a little bit about your background because you've got an incredible background. So you've got your ventures called Pretiosum. You work for Jeffries. You know, you've done project development, the Bloomberg. I mean, you've got an incredible, rich, diversified background. So tell me a little bit about it. I know we were talking off stage about AI and some of the things you're interested in. Can you tell our audience about where you're interested today and where you see some of the future?
Sure. Thank you very much, first of all, for having me here, Gary. I feel humble, especially after the latest guest that you had, Kawasaki. It was such an amazing conversation, intimate as well, because you guys know each other. I learned a lot, so I strongly recommend everyone in the audience to watch the episode with Kawasaki if you haven't done so. And about myself, you did a pretty good job with the summary. I consider myself a real European citizen. I studied across Europe, so UK, Germany, France, Italy. I'm Italian, as you can tell from my name and from my accent. And as you rightly pointed out, I started my career at Bloomberg, so I'm a bit of a hybrid profile between financial data, tech, and finance. And then I quickly moved to the dark side of the moon, Gary, investment banking, where I was working for an American investment bank covering the internet retail European sector. So I was responsible for names such as Ocado, Boohoo, ASOS, so large cap, more than a couple of billion of market cap. And then, due to internal requirements, I moved to utilities, which I realized it was an incredibly boring sector. Today, we're speaking about VC, early stage investments, and AI. Well, utilities is the opposite of it, right? It's a very slow-moving sector, non-innovative, traditional. So I quickly realized that I wanted to change, and VC was just a natural exit. So I joined Pretiosum Ventures from the very beginning, which is a London-based fund. I finally invest in technologies that I'm interested in. So we focus on fintech, AI, future work life across B2B. We take a very active approach, and that's why we like to work with Gary from GSD Studio, because obviously being a startup studio, they take a really active approach. And we like to do so as well through the people that work for us and for our partners. We do invest primarily in Europe plus Israel. Average check size can be quite flexible, 100K all the way up to 2 millions. And we focus on early stage investments, so seed stage and Series A. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to speak about AI if you want in Europe. Yeah, and it's a topic that I'm particularly interested in. I'm currently writing an article with two professors from Harvard and ESCP Europe, which will be published soon by a leading university, which I can disclose the name of. Very much looking forward to speak with you, Gary.
Yeah, so Luca, now tell me, so why do you limit? I'm just curious. So you've got Israel, you've got Europe. What made you decide to not invest in other places? And secondly, what about places like Russia? I mean, do you consider that Europe, or what are the limits?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question, actually. We do have a couple of Russian companies in our portfolio. It's a country where we see huge potential, both for the number of talents and also for the untapped market, because there are not many unicorns, especially in the artificial intelligence and internet space. So we do look at some of the Russian companies opportunistically. Ultimately, we focus on Europe primarily because our partners have a bunch of experience there. So our partners have been working in VC for more than 20 years across different European entities and in Israel as well. So that's where we think we have the best network. And VC at the end of the day, especially in the early stage, is all about the network and accesses the deals faster than everyone else. So that's why just limiting the focus sometimes make you act and move faster.
So when you look at it, so tell me, so a company comes in, they're from St. Petersburg or Moscow, Belarus. what do you look for? I mean, so they come at you. I know you talked about the future work.
Yeah.
Exactly what are you looking for? What really, if you could say, Luca, this is the holy grail of what I want to find in a company. What is it?
Yeah. The honest answer is that there is not a holy grail, because the companies can be operating on different sectors. So particularly, you're very experienced in AI, Gary. You know better than me that in seed stage for AI companies, it's very, very difficult to see tractions, right? So these companies come in pitching to you without revenue, without first paying clients, with only like a pilot or a product. In this case, we look at the team and the total addressable market first of all. Then when it comes to future work life, so productivity tools or communication tools, the traction is very important. So we like to look at companies with some sort of product market fit. So, initial clients, initial pilots, potentially annual recurring revenue between 500K and 1 million for the classic software services. But we don't have like something that we use, because obviously seed stage and Series A is very different in US and in Europe, and there is not like a magic formula, I would say. So the team and the total addressable market are the most important things. When it comes to traction, it depends from the industry, and it also depends from the countries that you're operating in.
So I got a question. I want to paint a picture, because
sure.
I'm a country boy from Pennsylvania. So I grew up in the mountains, 1,000 people in our village. I'm just a country boy. So, keep it simple. If somebody comes in and they've got, let's say, $500,000 in revenue, ARR, and they're coming in and they come to see you. This is the first round of funding. How do you determine, I know you said about the team, et cetera, and the total addressable market, but how do you determine that AI company would be a fit for you? And then conversely, what if they don't have, they've got 100K worth of revenue, another company in AI? How do you determine so you're looking at them right now? Is it the growth of the company, what their sales are going to be, expansion plans? What's the thing that says Luca does it? This is, that holy grail switch.
Yeah, 500K annual recurring revenue for an AI company, it's already an impressive number. So when they have 500K, they're usually between the seed stage and the Series A. So that's a very encouraging point. Usually at that stage, they already raised money from some other investors. So that's a good sign, especially if you have good investors on board. And also at the same time, we want to see what's the potential. At the end of the day, Gary, you know it better than me. You scale and started a lot of startups from day one. Some startups, they're just not the right fit for VC. I mean, I wouldn't recommend some startups to raise money from VC. At the end of the day, you have this mantra where you need to raise money from VC, but it's not the case for everyone. So the application of the AI technology itself, it needs to be potentially a unicorn 1 billion plus company. And I'm saying the obvious here, but not all of them will be. So we'll be looking at potential for exit opportunities, potentially for being a unicorn company. And at the end of the day, it's all about the long-term plan. So usually the company comes to you explaining what's the plan over the next 5-10 years. Now, we don't expect, like in the public market, that if you say I'm going to achieve 1 million by next year, you have to achieve 1 million. You know that the numbers are a bit fingers in the air in the early stage, but we want to see a direction, right? That's the most important thing. We want to see a vision in the company.
So, and that, Luca. So when they come up to you, and I've had this happen to me many times, they come up and say, oh, this is where the total addressable market, we're going to have, I had actually had it with a battery company. We're going to own 90% of this market, and it's a $40 billion market. This is a direct conversation from the scientist. And it's like, how do you see through the BS? There's a lot of BS out there, and it's pie in the sky. Where do you draw the limit? In terms of this person doesn't really get it. What happens for you? What's a thought process like?
You're totally right. Whenever we see a slide on the total addressable market, which is obviously always in the range of 10, 20 billion or more, and they say we're going to capture 80-90% of the market, we know that it's a BS, right? I mean, it's possible, but at the end of the day, it probably happens 1 out of 1 billion times. And so it's we know that it's a common BS, but we also know that a lot of founders like to speak about the traction and the addressable market. So we like to hear it because I would be more scared if a founder doesn't really speak about the total addressable market and doesn't understand how big is the opportunity for them. So even if you know that it's not achievable to get 80% of a 20 billion market, we still want to know that you have a good understanding on the industry.
And so what about your position? Do you take lead position? Do you take follow-on positions? How do you really, what do you prefer?
We usually follow on at this stage. It may change in the, we co-invest basically. So we like to see having a strong VC lead and we would co-invest with them. That's our sweet spot. It may change in the future, but we decide to go on like this for now. And that has been like very successful. Over the last year, we invested in 9 companies. Few of them are going for a next round. So we like this approach for now.
And what's a typical check size? So when you say this is our sweet spot, what is it?
We're very flexible. So it can be as small as 100K all the way up to 2 million. So obviously it changes a lot if it's seed or Series A. Series A it's obviously would be more in the range of 1-2 million. So
if somebody comes in, let's say they have a total round, and again, this is for the startups from around the world that listen to us. So they come in and they're raising a total of $5 million. Is it interesting for you to put 2 million into a $5 million round?
It could, yeah. We are currently in conversations with companies that are raising 5-7 million. So we do look at them. Maybe like something above 10 million is a bit too high, because otherwise our ownership of the company, it would rather be insignificant. And we still want to take an active approach and try to help the company as much as we can through our network and our expertise. So the example that you provided, yes, something double than that is probably a bit of a stretch. It's probably a bit too much excessive for us. It's too excessive for us. At 10 million, it would be on the edge.
So this is really cool too. So you talk about you want to take an active approach, and I know from my perspective, I love VCs that you can bounce ideas off, because sometimes as CEO of a company, you believe your own BS, right? It's like drinking the Kool-Aid. You start to believe it. So you need to have those sounding boards. What kind of approach? Let's say you're on the board of this AI future work company that's doing workforce management. Where do you see yourself? What kind of role do you take on that board in terms of your participation with the company? And what is cool for you? What do you really like?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, Gary. And I completely agree with you that a lot of people claim that they take an active approach, but at the end it's a BS. Again, it's a recurring word, this BS. For some reason, we believe that, the most value add deduction that you can do is connection and networking. So we try to help companies connecting them to the leading corporates in Europe, and not only in Europe. Our partners have been doing this job for a very long time, so they have connections in all the boards of the kind of like listed technologies companies in Europe, but not only in Europe. And at the end of the day, early stage is a people business. So providing connection to a startup that doesn't have a founder and all of a sudden start to have a name such as SAP as a client, it completely changed the perception around the company. Then obviously we help with connection with other investors. We have a strong network of investors in Europe. I kind of know one person out of like 90% of the funds based in Europe, and that's very helpful for scale up and follow-on rounds. But we also help them on a number of other activities, so business development, recruiting, product feedback. We do have a team of like about between 500 and 1,000 people that are working directly for the partners, not directly for us, but for different companies of the partners. And they can come in very helpful when it's about supporting the companies on a number of different activities.
And so, it's really important too. I mean, startups don't realize how important it is to have those connections, because as one of my employees says, Gus, and I hope you're listening, he wrote the book, Business is a Contact Sport. And he's one of our partners. But it's true, right? It's all about the contacts, because you invest, especially now with the digital transformation, in companies and people that you trust. So can you talk, in terms of, those relationships? You said SAP, and I feel that myself, because with Click Software, one of our first deals was SAP. And it was critically important for us. We did an IPO after that on NASDAQ, et cetera. But that these can be critically important for a startup. So it sounds like you're using those connections. And do you have them just in Europe, or does it span other regions?
No, we do have that. So our partners like invested in a big company that was listed in the US. They invested into Skype as well, that was acquired by eBay, and later on by Microsoft. Actually, is a good example of one of these bad acquisition from corporates, because nowadays everyone is using Zoom. But yeah, funny enough, we do have connections in US as well. I would say very honestly that our core focus is Europe, and that's where we have the strongest connections. But having done this job for a very long time, our partners, they have global connections, but Europe is our main focus.
I see. And so, and how big is the fund, Luca? Can you say how big the fund is?
Yeah, we have like private capital coming from the founders up to 50 million, and at the same time we are planning to raise an additional fund over the next month, and it's going to be mostly like institutional investors, so external funds.
So you mentioned AI, and I'm really, as you know, we like to talk about that on different panels together. But I mean, how important is it for companies that are coming at you today? When you talk about, one is, everybody says AI, and to be honest with you, I think 90% of them don't know what they're talking about. Yeah. Oh, I have AI, but it's really some kind of light algorithmic math. So you have a company in, and they have sophisticated artificial intelligence. How important is that for you in terms of the investment? How do you consider that? How do you weight it?
I completely agree. Yeah, AI is one of these buzzwords that everyone is using just to make their company more appealing, let's say. Oftentimes it's just like an automation or an Excel process or some sort of like light Python script. And it's very difficult. You need to have the right people, the experts, to analyze the AI underlying algos. We're lucky enough that we have a partner who used to be a software developer, mathematician, succeeding as an entrepreneur. So it's very good at reading these AI technologies and differentiate the BS from the really AI strong potential unicorns, let's say. And it's extremely important for us, right? We would never invest in companies that are claiming to be AI, but at the end of the day, they're not. By AI, we mean a level of automation that is close to 100%, right? Where the man doesn't really need to overlook the whole process, and the whole process can be run automatically. So that's not very easy to achieve in the seed stage. So oftentimes you have a hybrid between human and AI, but we want to see the potential to get there, to be 100% fully automated.
Yeah, so you're looking at semi-supervised and unsupervised. And you said something interesting. So you don't see it at the seed stage. So you're looking for the potential of the company and the horsepower of the founders or the CTO or product manager to take that level. How do you do that? Because they come in and they say, hey, here's what we have. And it's not all, it's partly real. So how do you, say, oh, I think this is going to be it. This is going to be, this process is going to be fully automated.
Sure. So oftentimes what you see in the seed stage is that they have a demo or a beta version. And so you want to check the demo and the beta version. Obviously, you want to check the user interface, but you also want to check the code when it's possible. So we may do a deep due diligence on that. And at the same time, trusting someone that did this before, it's much easier than trusting someone that came straight from university and never did something similar. So potentially we want to see someone with a previous exit. Obviously, we do speak even from people coming straight from accelerators, universities that never really started a company, if they have the right background, right? So if you studied artificial intelligence in a very good university, that's usually a good sign that you probably have the capabilities of doing so. But there are some signs that you need to check and some box that you need to kind of like ticks in order.
You're smiling, Luca. You're smiling. What are the ticks? Give them come on.
The university where you're coming from. It's obviously you need to be aware of diversity, but the university where you're coming from, if you are a young founder, is very important. And particularly, like, we don't want to see a founder who studied history and then is starting a company in the AI space as a developer, unless they have some sort of like trusted people that are helping with them. Potentially, like in the AI space, particularly in the quantum computer, you want to see founders that wrote particularly white papers on the technology, or that collaborated with universities, because they're still the biggest research and development hub around the world. Usually most of these patents are coming from the universities. And also, as I mentioned before, if they founded something, it needs to be relevant to what they're doing now, or potentially the previous experience need to help them for the current one. So we don't mind to see founders that fail, but we want to see a learning experience coming from the failure.
There you go. So startups out there, you don't mind seeing somebody that fails, but you want to make sure you learned a lesson, right?
Yeah, no, that's good. And in Europe, we struggle a bit of doing so. In US, I think you guys, there is way more culture of trying, falling, and bouncing back. In Europe, there is more of a culture of finding a stable job, not really trusting startups, maybe for the right reason, I don't know, but this drag us down in terms of innovation. And it's particularly relevant, especially when we speak about AI, because I think that the main gap between Europe and countries such as China and US over the last 20 years is that we missed the digital innovation of internet, and we missed that both. And if you look at the GDP trend of Europe in comparison to these two countries, the gap is huge over the last 20 years. Why? Because we don't have companies such as Skype, Zoom in the communication space. We don't have Facebook and Instagram in the social network. We don't have Google in the search browser. And now we don't want this to happen again with the artificial intelligence revolution, which is going to be the next one, I believe. So that's why I wrote this article recently addressing these points, which are the problems of Europe, what is dragging us behind, and what we can do in the future to address this gap.
Are there any kind of secrets? Give us some of this sounds really cool.
Sure.
Give us the secret keys. Come on.
I can
when Europe back, and what do we need to do to get better?
Yeah, I can give you like a quick preview of the article. We basically summarized together with Terence Say, who's a professor at TSCP, and Mark Esposito, who's a professor at Harvard. We identified three main issues. The main one is related to regulation, the lack of it, or maybe like the excess of regulation. In US and China, Gary, they have a very relaxed approach when it comes to regulation of AI. In Europe, we have data protection policies, GDPR, and at the end of the day, regulation is directly linked to data. If you think about an AI algo, it needs to be data feeds the AI algo, right? The more data you have, the smarter the machine will be, the more useful it will be for you. And at the end of the day, in Europe, we don't have access to a huge database like in US and China. So we want to be, obviously it's a trade-off between privacy on one hand, and on the other hand, you have the efficiency of the machine. I really think that the benefits will be more than the cons if we let a more relaxed regulation framework come into place in Europe. So that's the main problem. The data and the regulation side. The European Union is doing something, but it's not enough yet. And at the end of the day, it's a bit worse at the moment. I want to see execution, because bureaucracy is a very European French word. On paper, it looks good, but then the execution is crucial. And you know it, right? Being in a startup studio, the idea is just 5% is all about the execution. So that's the first issue. The second issue is about the digital skill gap. And what I mean by digital skill gap, I don't mean that we lack talents or data scientists. Fun fact, actually, if you look at the leading technology company R&D department across the globe, so in Israel, Europe, and US, they're led by European figures. They're led by people that were educated in Europe, because we have amazing universities, especially in the technology sector in UK, France, Germany, Italy. The problem is more with people like myself and you, Gary. Like, in France, you have 20% of the population that struggle to access basic services online. So they struggle to use social network, they struggle to run a search on Google, and they struggle also to access public services from the government online. That's the big problem, because these people will oppose you if you want to push artificial intelligence forward. Why? Because they're scared. They're afraid of artificial intelligence. If you look at the tabloid or the lower quality publishing platform, they always paint AI as this monster that is gonna make you lose your job. It's true. I mean, some job will be lost because of AI, But this will be highly repetitive jobs, such as scanning items in a shopping market or like screwing a driver for 9 hours. Now, I don't think the human brain is done for this repetitive task. I think we should be dedicating more time to creative tasks, such as this conversation that you're having or starting a startup from scratch. And AI can help us, to dedicate more time to that. Actually, there is a very good book from a friend of mine and a professor, Terence. It's called AI Startup. I recommend it to everyone. It's not technical at all. And it's speaking exactly about that. So we shouldn't be afraid of the loss of jobs. We should be more interested in the inclusion and the time that we will gain by using artificial intelligence technologies. And we should be embracing the technology. So the book is called AI Startup and is extremely good. It was eye-opening for me. So the third problem after the data regulation one and the digital skill gap is the lack of funding. And you know it better than me, right? So operating companies across Europe, Russia, and US, we are not at that level like in US and China. The good thing is that the number is going up. So we're almost doubling every year the investment in AI. The growth rate is much higher than in other countries and continents, but at the same time, the base is lower. So us at Prometheus Ventures, we're trying to contribute to that, so to invest more in Europe. And it's encouraging that a lot of American funds came here. Now, we're a bit slow, probably because of the two main problems of regulation and digital skill gap, but we're catching up. We do need more help from the European authorities. So there was a huge plan this year that is going to invest out of public funding billions of euro every year. Hopefully this is going to be executed in the right way, because it's not about just spreading some money here and there. It's about people that know about the technologies and they know where to invest this money. So again, I'm very optimistic, but at the same time, I'm very worried that something like it happened over the last 20 years, it will repeat itself over the next 20. That's the overall meaning of the article, is addressing this gap and how we should do it to operate that. Ultimately, we have a lot of promising startups. We don't have the American giants, but they have the potential to be so.
Oh, we love those. And, you're right about it. Think about our world, Luca, our world today. And so if you look at it, the average person has about 300,000 items with their own personal cloud. The entire web in 1996 was 257,000 websites. Each one of us here in the audience probably has more than the entire size of the web in 1996. And the thing is, it's grown. It's doubling every year. In 5 years with the Internet of Things, within your own personal cloud, Google Drive, Dropbox, Box, Telegram, WeChat, Slack, think about it. You can have, 25 to 30 repositories. And people say, no, but when they count them, they do. We are in a state, as Alvin Toffler said, of infobesity. 10 million items. How many times in the last month have you said, I know I got the email or that message, I don't remember where it is. I remember a PowerPoint presentation for 3 months ago, but I'm not sure where I got it. Did I get it WhatsApp or Messenger? Who knows? We are in a state of infobesity. The idea of artificial intelligence to be able to help us as not a smart, but an intelligent assistant is here. And the way the European Union, the way the world is going to make our lives a lot better is by taking those technologies and harnessing those technologies for the betterment of mankind, of humankind, right? I was talking to one of the top astronauts. He's going to be on my show in a few weeks. There are, in the Milky Way galaxy, there are 6 billion Earth-like planets in the Milky Way. It's now estimated there could be up to 200 trillion galaxies in the universe. We are just beginning to explore. Think of the AI that's needed to be able to help us drive forward. So it is incredible. And I think, I applaud you. The one thing about it is I did a TED Talk, TEDx, and I talk about passion, optimism, and visualization.
I watched it.
You watched it. It's like, it's to move forward in your life, to drive forward. That's why we created GSD, to give some passion and show them anybody can do it. If you believe and you got the right contacts and friends like yourself and a network, you can do anything you want. And I encourage all those companies out there from Europe, right? Of course, GDPR, there's always going to be regulations. The key is how to be able to work with those regulations and build the next Skype and build the next Facebook and Twitter and SAP. It can be done, obviously be done. Part of it is in your mind, believing you can do it. And I applaud you. I want to read your article. I can't wait to see it. I think it's phenomenal that you put that together. And, so in closing, so we're broadcasting to 900,000 plus folks out there are watching. What would you say to them? Let's say they've got a company and they want to contact you. What are you looking for? How long does it take? What's the process like to get in touch with you to show you some really, really cool AI companies that could help you?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. Unfortunately, there is not like a perfect answer for that. What I would say is be aware of the risk, so that 9 out of 10 companies fail. I'm very much against the, this kind of like you only go to speak to the press when you make it. It would be nice to have a podcast with all the people that didn't make it and to learn more, right? Because ultimately you learn from failures. So be aware of the risk, but don't be afraid. I mean, once you take, there's never been a better time than now to create a company. We have the public funding, we have the private funding, you have all the knowledge available online, and not only, you can easily access from experts all over the world. So I think there's never been a better time to create and invest in a company at the same time, particularly in Europe. So I think we should, especially in Europe, overcome our fears and start to, sort of educate more entrepreneurship and risk-taking classes in universities, but even a lower level in high school. So, and then, speaking about ourselves, you can easily reach me out on whenever, or there is like a website, an email on our website, sorry, so you can reach us out. Obviously, we receive a lot of emails, but I try to read all of them. And also, we're doing an open office hours in a few weeks, 28th of October, where we gather the most influential B2B investors in Europe. And we will be receiving application from B2B companies in the seed and Series A stage. And so basically we'll match them, and you will get some recommendation from the most important investors in Europe, both on your deck, on the product, on networking, marketing advices. So that's a unique opportunity. And if you follow me on my social on LinkedIn or Twitter, I will be advertising it very soon. And as long as you are in the B2B space and you are early stage, you're very welcome to apply.
That sounds great. And Luca, I have a show that's we have in Silicon Valley called Gary's Picks, and I do it for the VCs worldwide, and it highlights the top global startups. So if you have startups that you would like to have highlighted and broadcast out, I would be happy to do it. It runs every 2 weeks, and it would be great to have some of your companies on my show.
I'm sure that our companies would love to be part of it. At the end of the day, it's all about visibility and connection. So I'm sure we can definitely speak about it.
All right, sounds great. So I thank you very much. Thank you very much for your kindness. I'm humbled to have you on the show, and I look forward to talking to you again. And I'm sure we'll see each other on other panels, and we'll be talking every month as normal. So thank you, Luca, very much. Thanks for joining my show.
I think we have a panel together tomorrow, probably for a startup competition. But thank you very much, Gary, for having me today.
Sounds great. See you tomorrow, then.
Experience. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Olek, how are you today?
I'm good, Gary. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. It's great to see you. I understand you've been burning the candles at both ends.
Mm-hmm.
You've been busy?
A little bit been busy, but it's all good. It's much better to be busier than not busy. And the summer was quiet, but it seems that everybody has come out to play in September. So there's plenty of due diligence and course to take.
So talk a little bit about your venture capitalist, you're an entrepreneur, you see companies primarily focused on Eastern Europe and Europe, correct? So, and it's great to have you here. I know it's, what time is it, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at nighttime?
Yeah, a little bit, but it's okay.
Where are you now? Are you in Prague or?
I'm in Prague. Hello from Prague to the world.
Okay, so can you so in terms of your investment, folks, I know we've talked about it many times. So we're out to startups all over the world. We have startups from China, venture capitalists from China, Dubai, all over watching the show. Tell them a little bit about what really trips your trigger and what's interesting for you.
Great question. I'll start off with a little bit of an introduction to give some context to the viewers about what kind of things I'm personally interested in, and then I'll talk about what Creative Ventures do. So my background is originally I'm a founder, and started the first startup, I think, at the beginning of 2015. Prior to that, I was just hustling. I was just doing random odd job businesses here and there, trying to get something together. But then when I started a proper startup, I would say it was 2015, and it was a machine learning startup with my co-founder, and we were doing natural language processing for enterprise. And that's the kind of things that I'm very, very interested in. I'm interested in applied AI. I'm interested in communication between businesses and customers, as well as customers and businesses. I view those two different things separately. To me, customer to business communication is a specific nuance to it, whereas business to customer communication is pretty much marketing. So I'm much more interested in the customer to business type of route. What else? At Credo, we look at startups across the board, but we swing a little bit closer to the B2B. We look at everything, but we have better expertise in the B2B enterprise space. So that's why this is something that is of interest. That's pretty much it, I would say. I can go into detail about...
So you did, what is it called? Centisum, right?
Indeed. Centisum was, and still is, a company. It's run by my co-founder, Sharad Kandival. I'm very thankful for Sharad and for the time that we worked together. I learned so much. What we done in the beginning and what we do now, what Centisum does now, is probably two different things. We started off as a personal shopping assistant in the beginning of 2015, before the whole chatbot craze. And then we built a technology stack from the ground up, and we learned that our unit metrics were not going to work out. So we pivoted and ended up in enterprise, where we served large customers from logistics to insurers to help them understand the pain points of their customers. And we've done all of this through natural language processing.
Interesting. So I want to just dive deep in a couple of things. So one thing, you said you're a hustler. You start out hustling, right? How important is, when you talk to startup founders, is being able to hustle? How important is that? If you look at a characteristic, what do you think?
Well, I'm a little biased, and I think everybody needs to understand that everybody has their biases, and whoever you speak to, it's important to recognize that person's biases as well as your own. So to me, I have a lot of affinity to founders who come from underprivileged backgrounds, who may have not went to the best universities in the world, and who have kind of studied this hard school of knocks. And that's what I have an affinity for. To me, being a hustler means not having a doubt in your mind that where you're going to get to, you're going to get to. I know the journey may never be clear, and you may have a clear journey at that moment in time, but the doubts in your mind about where you want to end up, I think, is a clear indication of a hustler. And it's very important to me personally. I think especially a good engineer who has a lot of motivation can outpace a whole team of mediocre engineers. And that's, to me, hustle.
So hustling is important, and you're right about it, because I talk about passion, optimism, and visualization, and you've hit the nail right on the head. Visualizing where you want to be, and not being afraid to get there. And you also said something very interesting. Because it doesn't happen everywhere. Failure, sometimes people say, "Oh, I don't want to fail," but a pivot isn't a failure, is it?
No, I wouldn't say a pivot is a failure. I mean, to me, failure isn't opposite of success. I would say that failure is actually halfway to success. I think the opposite thing to success is doing nothing, or doing the same thing that you've done before and expecting different results. To me, a failure is just a partial success that didn't end up where you wanted to be, but hopefully you can take lessons learned from that.
Oh, I love that. That's a good partial success. Didn't get exactly to where you would have. Oh my God, we got to use that. I'm sure the startups come in and tell you and say, "Listen, let me tell you about it. It's a partial success."
Exactly, it was a partial success. It's like when I was an engineer, I would say this is not a bug. This is a feature.
That's great. Yeah. Boy, oh boy, I'll tell you. Then, so obviously having some sales skills really good too, right?
It kind of helps. I think being a natural introvert, you have to learn how to speak to people, how to build rapport, and definitely I think that's a skill set that you can improve. You just have to put yourself out there, and eventually you get the hang of the ropes, I think.
And so how important, I mean, it's so I started an accelerator in Russia, and we used to teach them how to sell, right? We presentation, but how much on a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being the best, how important is being able to, as a CEO or co-founder of a company, being able to sell into market? How important?
This is a really interesting question because it really depends on the context of the business and where you're doing your business. So let's say that you are in, I don't know, biotech, and let's say that you're in something that's very deep techy, then maybe being a fancy salesman isn't going to help you that much when you have to hit the market. However, that being said, you still have to convince people to join you, to work with you, to believe in your mission. And one of the things that I really underappreciated, I think, in the early stages of my career is the power of being able to convince people to follow your mission. I was always in the school of thought that I should learn how to do it myself. So I stubbornly pretty much learned everything from design to development to engineering.
Well, you were an engineer, right? I mean, you were what, a full stack engineer?
Right now I'm a full stack engineer. So I started in, I believe, 2012 as a WordPress CMS developer with Magento, Drupal, Joomla. I don't know if people remember these words. And then I kind of moved to web development, and eventually I started building applications and learned that I had to deploy the apps. And then I learned that building the apps is only a tiny little slice of actually building a proper system. And then I learned how to deploy the applications. And now I help companies in rapid prototyping and going from 0 to 1 as quickly as possible, because I think that there's many different ways that you can actually cut out a lot of the painful engineering to validate your idea. That's my favorite part of actually being a mentor and a VC now, is passing on a knowledge of you don't need that much engineering skill nowadays specifically to test out an idea, but to actually productionize an idea, you need very good engineers. And I would say senior people who've been there, done that before.
And so, you talk about going out. How important is it to use customer development? So there's a company coming out, they've invented, because I've seen this a lot of times, right? I got the best thing in the world ever. And I had it happen to myself. I was an idiot when I was young in my career. I decided that I knew better than everybody else, and that I was a single founder. And I thought, oh, this is the way it should be. Everybody's going to like it. And I'm not Steve Jobs. and, oh my God, they hated it. And I was like, for 3 years, I was in pain because I couldn't, I had to reinvent the wheel. I had to go back and change it. And I finally did it, but it was the 3 most painful years. I probably lost $1 million, I think, because of my own stupidity. I learned a valuable lesson. You're probably not right most of the time. You better listen. So tell me about, from your perspective, right? How important is it to go out and do your customer development before you start investing a lot of money and having an MVP to present?
This is a great question. And I think this is a question which is super important, specifically to the region that we're at. I find that when speaking to founders from England and across the pond, that this is not even a question or an issue, that you should do customer development before laying down any code. But I find that in Central Europe, and especially Eastern Europe, we have fantastic technical talent. And obviously, the first thing that technical talent does is start cutting code. And I've been guilty of this so many times, is that when you have the ability to build something, you really just sidestep the validation. You just want to build it. You just want to get it out there. And I think taking the time and having the discipline to go out and speak to your customers before you've actually built something is beneficial for two reasons. The first reason is that you don't waste time building something that might not necessarily be sellable. And the second reason is that your product hasn't been built when you're selling a idea or validating your product. Therefore, you are free to actually focus on the problem that your customer might have, rather than pushing to them a product that is solving some problem that might not be a priority in their books. So to me, customer validation is extremely important. It's just much easier to do, and this is why teams will have a good balance between technical and business and design, I would say, the teams that I look for the most.
Yeah, I mean, when we were doing Eva, so my partner David Yang and I, so it was called Findo first. So we thought, oh, this is the greatest idea. We're going to solve this problem. We're going to go out. Everybody can't find things. We'll do a personal search, right? For a Google-like search for your cloud. Great idea. Phenomenal idea. The problem is people are so used to Google giving things for free, they don't want to pay for it. Yep. Then the very simple thing, people can't find things within their email and their files and folders and all that for sure. But they don't remember their passwords.
Yep.
And they don't want to go back and retrieve them. And they're scared to give anybody access to it. And I don't care who it is, right? One login, they're really afraid and they won't admit it. So I have had the top 50 CEOs of companies worldwide that I had a discussion with. He said, I got a very simple solution. I said, what's that? He said, if it's older, he said, I started 2 years ago. If it was older than 2 years, my email, I got rid of it. A year ago, I said every email older than a year ago, I got rid of it. And this is a tech CEO. And then 6 months ago, I said any email older than 6 months, I don't have to worry about it. I said, what about Google Drive? And it doesn't matter. I said, well, what if you do it was important? He said, they'll write me back. If it's that important, they'll get back to me.
That's very true. That is so true. And I think this is not the first time I'm hearing this advice. It's I used to take it personally when somebody didn't reply to me. I remember doing my first go-to-market business development activities. And I remember when I would send one email and I wouldn't get a reply and I would get terribly upset and I would be like, oh no, they don't want to speak to me. But what I've come to learn over the years is that unless the person tells you don't message me ever again, I think it's completely fine to keep emailing them and then telling them, hey, I'm being professionally persistent. I don't know what's happening in your life. Just let me know if this is interesting to you or not. And I personally answer on average after the third email, because I would say that my guilty conscience starts outweighing my priorities for other tasks. And I'm definitely going to answer. I'll be like, oh no, I'm being an ass here. I should probably answer and speak to the person.
So 3 emails. So startups out there, if you write to Olek, 3 emails, and you probably get...
No. Startups, I have the mass... No, you misunderstand. Startups, I have the most respect for because I know how crazy these people are.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I will try and answer all emails within 24 hours. What I'm talking about is someone doing business development or customer validation. That kind of thing I would answer only after 3 or 4.
So from your standpoint, Olek, if a startup wants to get a hold of you, everybody's got their secret kind of place, LinkedIn or Telegram or WeChat or whatever. What is the one that you look at and say, this is the best way to get a hold of me?
You know what? I hope I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot, but you can just easily use my second name at credoventures.com and send me all the emails you want. I am pretty open to getting inbound emails as long as... Actually, there's no as long as. If you need anything advice, if you want to send a pitch deck, feel free. I pretty much look at every single pitch deck. We at Credo have certain limitations, which are, I think I should mention, which is we invest into founders from specific geographies, and that's Central Europe. So a little bit about Credo is that we invest into founders from Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia, Croatia, Romania, Hungary, and Poland. You can be a founder from those regions living in San Francisco, and that is still fine. There needs to be a strong connection to this region for us to qualify as an investment. Apart from that, there is nothing else. We invest from pre-seed to Series A, 500K to 1.5 million. And we're usually very quick with our decisions, and we're founder friendly. So feel free to message me if you fit those criteria. If you don't, a nice little message just explaining your situation and why you want to chat also works. I'm more than happy to spend 30 minutes with founders going through the pitch deck. I love doing that. I remember how horrible my pitch deck was, and sharing insights and actionable insights is one of the most fulfilling things. I think in a profession that has 3 to 5 year feedback cycles, sharing insights is a pretty fulfilling thing.
No, I agree. And I don't know about you, but do you get a lot of email every day? Are you?
I get a lot of email every day. And my inbox is a mess, but I really try to stay on top of it. I have a routine which I go through my inbox in the morning and evening. Unfortunately, I don't use any fancy apps like Superhuman. For me, it's good old Google that works, and that's pretty much it. So Google Meet around, and Gmail is the communication that I prefer.
And so if you get an email, so what is it like this, if you look at, you get hundreds of emails, but what is the thing, if it stands out in like a subject line, advice for the startups going out to VCs, what do you think helps them stand out? So you say, oh, I got to look at this thing. I feel like sometimes somebody put in there to me, and I think I already responded to something. I don't know about you, but it's like, oh, wow, where did I get this?
This is a trick that quite a few founders do, and I think eventually we'll become blind to it, like with advertising. I mean, like, the best thing that you could say is that you are seeing traction of anything between 20 to 30% month-on-month growth in either your revenue or key bottom metric, or you're tripling year on year, and that would get my attention. Absolute numbers wouldn't really get my attention that much, because for us as VCs, we're looking to find that inflection curve, and growth rates are one of the best things to look at when you're trying to look for that. The other things that I would say would help in terms of, not me particularly, but I think everybody, is doing some research before reaching out. So let's say that you want to send a template email. I have found personally that they very rarely work. And most of my emails that work successfully, whether it's in customer acquisition or even getting introduced to Credo, is a very thoughtful but short email, hyper personalized to the person who you're speaking to. So just to give you an example, like what I would do if I was doing customer research or wanted to reach out to a VC, they're pretty identical in my mind, is try to find any piece of information about the person who you're actually trying to reach, and do some research, find out what they like, find out the things that they've done in the past, and show that you took the time to research the person who you're speaking to. That always works really well. Like if somebody has sent me a very personalized email, my guilty conscience doesn't even allow me to have a follow-up, because I'm like, look, this person has clearly went out of the way to craft a good message, and a good message doesn't have to be a long message. Actually, a good message is a concise, I think a paragraph, maybe 5 sentences should be more than enough. Often founders think long messages are good. I think that's lazy. So that's another topic for another day, or maybe for this day. But I think a shorter, concise message is the key.
I mean, I do, my partner, David Yang at Eva, he told me, he said, Gary, do one line. Just like one sentence, one sentence, one sentence, one sentence. Don't have more than 5 or 6 sentences in there, and it gets her attention. And he told me it actually does work, right? Yep. So if you do that, because people don't have time to read down through, and they're like, forget about it. This has to be, nobody has written a letter like this to me, personalized. Just do it by sentence. Anyhow, that's what I do. So how big is your fund, by the way, Olek?
Our fund is, so we're in the fund. Our latest fund is 100 million euros. Our second fund was 56, and the first one was something between 15 and 20. I wasn't there.
Mhm.
I joined last year, in the beginning of last year. That's when the third fund has just closed. And in total at Credo, we have about 196 million under management. And our third fund is 100 million euros. So just to give some context to the viewers at home and the investment strategy, is we look to get an equity position of anything between 10 to 15%, because our investment strategy is to invest into unicorns or companies that have a potential of getting to a unicorn or fund maker. Now, a fund maker would be different for every single fund. Now, if there's a fund that has 50 million euros in the bank, and for them, maybe the ambitions would be a little less than for us. So that's a short, quick answer about
the fund maker, yeah?
Yeah.
So the fund maker. That's the first time I've heard that. Actually, the fund maker.
We hope to have more than one fund maker per fund, but as you probably know, the most VCs really underqualify, don't hit that degree. But we've been pretty lucky with Fund 2 and with UiPath.
And how many companies do you typically invest in a year?
We roughly deploy capital anything between 8 to 12 companies in a year. We look at roughly 1,200 to 1,500 companies in a year. And I personally try to speak to as many companies as I can, because I think that founders and their pitch decks are not very well aligned most of the time. But the criteria.
So what you're saying is their decks aren't aligned, and you want to make sure you understand the company, yeah?
Exactly.
Okay.
Look, we're looking for the needles in a haystack, and if I can identify a founder who's legitimately great but maybe messed up a pitch deck, like a pitch deck doesn't make a business. A pitch deck maybe is a way that a person doesn't understand that the importance of the communication. But I much prefer substance over appearance. So to me, I'll try to take most calls and have at least a 30-minute conversation with most founders to try to understand if they're a right fit for us at Credo, and how can I help them in any other way except the financial aspect, of course, because like money is the most undifferentiated commodity. So we look to try and help in terms of connections, advice, and et cetera, et cetera.
So you take an active role. So Luca had been previously on the show, talked about, what they do is they have a lot of contacts with like SAP and top European companies, so they can help the company grow their business and business development. How important is that, having those kind of relationships?
I think having partners and investors who can open doors for you is super crucial. I think not leveraging that is a big mistake. And I think a lot of founders look at investors as if they're like, I don't know, teachers and parents evening. Whereas they should be looking at investors as actually your partners and servants. We may be there to give you money, but we're there to serve the founders to actually create as much value as possible and to capture that value.
That's a great point. I mean, that's like really, really important, right?
It's super important.
Capture the value. I agree, because when the board of directors, the boards, the investors that have been the best are ones that we can actually feel that they're part of the team. And you have an idea, because as a CEO of a company, I mean, sometimes right? You don't have all the answers, and having somebody else can give you another opinion so you don't make the mistakes is just invaluable. So remember, founders, find VCs like Olek that can help you, that are willing to help, because it's critically important. You need to have them as part of your team. Olek, how many companies in a year? So you invest 12, 8. How many companies totally do you see every year to come up with that magic number?
Well, we are a team, right? So I'm not responsible for all the sourcing. We have a pretty tight team. There is 4 GPs. I'm an associate on the deal side, and then we have an associate on the back office side, and then we have a few analysts, and we're a very small team. So to answer your question, how many companies do I look at? I think I have my Affinity open. It's around 600 companies that I've looked at in the last, I would say 12 months.
Mhm.
And the reason why is because we've built out a lot of the automation and tooling at Credo. So we have a lot of early stage volume that I'm going through. But how many founders do I actually speak to? I would say that out of all the companies that we surface, I speak to a good 10 to 20%. So that's a pretty large amount because most companies that we surface are not actually looking for fundraising. If you are looking for fundraising and you want to approach Credo, then there's a high chance that I'll be speaking to you.
And then do you, so let's say you identify a company, but it's just not right at the second. Do you follow companies? Do you
Of course, yes. I spend some time doing this, and I know my partners have some feelings about that, about how much time I spend tracking companies that are too early and too not. It's a balance, and I find that if I'm able to provide value to the founders, a lot of the time I don't have to actively track the founders because the founders feel comfortable coming back and saying, hey, Olek, look, I have a few problems here or there. One of the key KPIs that I personally track is how many founders come back to me recommending startups, even if we rejected them. If we rejected a company, I think that that's a very traumatizing experience for most founders. And if I can soften the edge and provide value at the same time, I think that's a good idea. And that's one thing that I wish was happened a bit more often when I was fundraising.
No, I agree with you 100%. I mean, that's very kind of you to go out. I mean, it's really important. It's not easy being a founder. It's not easy getting the rejection, but guess what? That's part of the game, right?
Exactly.
And that's how you want to do it. So I want to say thank you. We're coming to the top of the hour. And Olek, I know you're tired. You've had some long nights and long days, but I really appreciate your time taken out of your busy schedule to get together with us. So can you tell the audience, the startups out there and the other VCs, how to get a hold of you and what's the best way to contact you?
Before I do that, I want to thank you, Gary, for having me on the show. It's a fantastic show, and it's big shoes to follow, so there's a little bit of pressure on my side. But where the founders can reach out to me, I would say LinkedIn is definitely the last place to reach out. I don't check LinkedIn that often. Just email me at bondarev@credoventures.com. I hope I don't get 1,000 emails tomorrow morning because of this, or I hope I do. I'll have to thank you for that. But you can email me, and as long as there's a clear ask, the context, and some kind of a deck or some kind of material to quickly look at, I would be more than happy to receive the messages from whoever wants to reach out. And the cadence that I work at, just to be very, very quick, is that I usually book my meetings and calls for the week after from Wednesday to Friday. So if you email me on Wednesday and a Friday, most likely we'll be able to jump on call the week after. If you email me on a Monday, maybe we could fit it in for Friday or Thursday. That's the cadence that I work at.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right. Thank you very much. And you did a great job of filling in the shoes. So thank you. We appreciate it. And I look forward to our conversations as always. And thank you, audience. Great to have you here today. Stay tuned. We'll be back same time in 2 weeks, and enjoy the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care, Olek.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.